Welcome back to our channel. So today we are going to talk about the miscarriage that we had last April. We're going to kind of go over things that happened and just our healing journey through all of it. We wanted to make this video to help anyone else who's going through something similar. This is such a sensitive topic, but I feel like it's so good for people to talk about it so that others don't feel alone when they're going through it.
So can you share exactly what you were feeling when you first found out you were pregnant, what that was like?
So I remember I was in the bathroom and it was a Sunday night and you had gone to the grocery store and it was just me and Georgia, and I went to the bathroom and I realized that I was supposed to start my period, and I actually got a little alarm that was like, if you don't start your period today, take a pregnancy test. And so I kind of casually took a pregnancy test that I found in the cabinet. I didn't really think much of it, and then it was positive. I was just so excited. I was in disbelief, and I remember I had to keep it to myself because I wanted to find a creative way to tell you. And so I waited till the next day and I got Georgia a big sister sweatshirt, and we came out and we surprised you, and it was super emotional and sweet, and you know, we caught it all in video and it was just this big moment, and I just felt so happy, and I feel like it just felt right. I didn't have any fear in the back of my mind. I just felt so happy. What about you? What was it like when you first found out we were pregnant?
I think it was really cool. I mean, you guys surprised me with the big sister sweatshirt, and that, you know, that couldn't have been further out of left field. I did not expect that at all. And Georgia ran out with it, and it took me a good minute to realize that she was wearing a sweatshirt that said big sister. And it was, you know, we were both really excited. Having a second child was something that we both wanted, so it was, you know, it was really exciting. It really was.
Was there any moment that you, even in the back of your mind, thought that something could go wrong?
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, nobody thinks that something could ever go wrong with their own pregnancy. You know, you hear a lot of stories about what happens to other people, and, you know, coming from a mother who had had 3 miscarriages before I was born, and I'm a firstborn, when it doesn't happen to you, maybe you take the stories kind of like in disregard. You know, you don't really think about it or what that really entails until it happens to you, and obviously it really puts that scenario in perspective. What about you? Did you have that thought that it could happen in the back of your mind at all?
No, I didn't even think about it. I feel like because Georgia's pregnancy was just so incredibly easy. We got pregnant easily. The pregnancy itself was easy. I didn't even think of that being a possibility, which I think led to us being completely blindsided.
So let's go back to the day that we found out that we had a miscarriage. When you mentioned being blindsided, that was definitely not the news that we were expecting to hear. And tell us about how that made you feel and what you were feeling in that moment, in that experience.
So we went to the doctor's office and we were so excited. We were going for we went for a 9-week checkup. We were out of town, so we didn't go at 8 weeks. We went at 9 weeks. And the hardest part is we had Georgia with us, and we were just so excited as a family to go see the heartbeat. And I had not even thought to myself of this being an option, that there wouldn't be a heartbeat. I truly did not. And so Daniel even had the phone out, like ready to videotape the heartbeat. And then all of a sudden the nurse just was like, let me go grab the doctor. I think he's gonna try and see. I'm having a hard time seeing what's going on, or like seeing a heartbeat. He's gonna go try the internal ultrasound. And so she was like, I'll let you get changed and then he'll be right in. Put like the hospital gown on and everything. And so when she told me that, as I was getting ready for him to come in, I had a sinking feeling, because with Georgia at this point, we could just see a heartbeat, and it was 9 weeks. So I was like, at this point, this should not be so hard. So I did have a very nervous feeling, but I was trying to hold on for hope. And then he did the ultrasound, and he was very kind, but it was just very like matter of fact. He just said, oh, this doesn't look good. I think you remember that, when he just said, this doesn't look good. And Daniel, like, you know, obviously wasn't filming anymore, and we all just kind of, our demeanor completely changed. In movies, you know, when like they show the person and it feels like everything's going in slow-mo and everyone's saying something to you, but it's like you can't even like comprehend words. I felt like I was just so in my own head, and I was also fighting back tears because Georgia was in the room and she's like, mommy, what's going on? And she's so empathetic and she's so intuitive that I felt like I had to keep it together. And I think that was probably one of the hardest things for me, is feeling this insane amount of grief come over me, but then having to try to remain calm because Georgia was in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember you looking at me and we both just looked at each other, like locking eyes, just like, this cannot be real, you know? Yeah. It was just so surreal. So yeah, it's like something I'll never forget, for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you remember the car ride home? I just remember holding your hand and we were just listening to, we were like blasting worship music.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when the doctor came in to do the ultrasound, like you said, I was trying to film to get the initial heartbeat and just getting that instant, I'm gonna get the doctor, maybe something doesn't look right. And I just, in that moment, it was like, oh no. And I just remember looking at you and I was like, just put the camera down. I was like, really just trying to stay positive, but I just knew in that moment, like, oh no, this is not good. We had Georgia and Georgia was asking, was everything okay? Just having Georgia in the room and her wondering, what's going on. I mean, she's very intuitive to the vibe in the room. And so she was very curious as to what we were feeling. And she had, she was asking questions and I was just trying really hard to just kind of put her at ease. And like you said, I mean, we kind of knew, had a feeling of what was coming. And
well, he had told us, just as precaution in case we got the dates wrong of like when my last period was, he said, let's give it 1 more week to see if a heartbeat shows up, because the baby was measuring at 5 weeks instead of 9 weeks. So he was like, either your math is off or there's no heartbeat. And so he said, let's give it 1 more week. And I remember you were really hopeful. You were like, let's give it 1 more week. And I just knew that it was over. And I was trying really hard to obviously pray for a miracle. I was believing that this kind of stuff happens all the time. Like people think that one thing and then it turns out to be a different outcome. But I just kind of in my heart, in my gut, knew that this was it. And then basically I just, about a week in from waiting to see, because our appointment was going to be like a couple days later, I started to bleed at the gym. And I'll never forget going to the bathroom. I just knew. And so it started happening. And at this point, I had just cried so much at home that week. I felt like I was preparing my heart for this. And so I did feel pretty numb when it started to actually happen. I think I just was like a little bit of a shell of a person at that point. We ended up basically calling the office and they said, like, let's just see what happens. If you have heavy bleeding, you can come in. Well, like 24 hours later, I was in a ton of pain and I was experiencing a lot of bleeding. And so we came into the emergency room and they said that I was gonna get a D&C, but then it was the weekend, so we couldn't get it. And I was in excruciating pain. So that was very traumatizing to be told I was getting a D&C. And then they were like, actually, you need to do it at home. And then I was given a ton of pain medication. And I just felt like I was so like doped up on pain medicine for the next couple of days that I was like just...
Well, because we went in on a Friday night, right? And
we went on a Friday night.
The doctor that did the DNCs was already out. So then we had to wait till Monday to come back while you were...
It was brutal.
...going through it. So you literally had to essentially labor through that process until Monday.
I feel like there's always so much attention on the mom as she's going through all of this, but what was it like for you seeing me go through this and experiencing it from your point of view?
I mean, I think it's a different experience from the father's perspective, of course. Firsthand, I'm not going through the physical aspect of the miscarriage. That comes with a different experience of its own. But the emotional side of it was really hard to see you not only mourning the loss of a child that we were really excited about, but having to physically go through the painful experience that came with the miscarriage was really hard to watch, because early on, even a couple weeks in, even 9 weeks in, the body starts doing so many different changes, having so many different hormonal responses already. And then when the miscarriage happens, those hormones are still there. There's a lot that goes with it. There's a lot of emotional trauma that you're going through. It's really hard for me as a father to watch you go through that. Anytime you're hurting, like I'm hurting, and it was just really hard because there was, you know, I could be there for you, but I felt like there was so little that I could do other than being there for you. You know, I wanted so badly to have an answer, to have a solution, have something to make it easier for you, and there's literally almost nothing I can do. So that was very hard.
Well, you did an amazing job, like with nobody knows how to navigate this. It's not like something we learn how to navigate until you're in the thick of it. And you did a really good job loving me, even when it was hard. And I mean, I can't imagine going through something like that with anybody else. I know one thing that's hard for couples is that everybody tends to grieve differently. And I think for you, you were just really focused on me. You didn't want me to hurt. You didn't want me to be so upset. I think it's easy for a lot of men to not even know how they feel in a situation because they're just so busy trying to fix what's going on with their wife, or like what's going on with their family during that time. And so I felt like you kind of almost had like a delayed grief. Like, whereas I felt like I just grieved so hard right away. I think that what now I understand is that you were grieving in your own way, but you were in survival mode, trying to make sure Georgia was okay, trying to make sure I was okay. And so I was grieving and so sad. And I think there was a time in the beginning of all of this when I got upset with you and was like, aren't you as upset as me? Like, aren't you as devastated as me? And I think that was unfair because everybody deals with grief differently. And then I felt like you went through a second wave of like kind of delayed grief where I saw you actually really were sad about it. But I felt like when it was first happening in real time, you were just in protector mode. And then I kind of saw you feel it once your walls came down after everybody else was kind of okay. And I think that's something that a lot of times people see is the mom going through intense grief, and maybe the husband's not experiencing the exact same level of emotion, but that doesn't mean it's not hurting you and affecting you.
So what do you feel now we're, 8-9 months past? What do you feel like is the most triggering thing for you that comes up about the miscarriage?
Well, there was a handful of women in my community that we all found out we were pregnant around the same time. And the hardest part was that obviously I experienced a miscarriage and then they didn't. And so, at church and at the gym, I was just watching their bumps steadily grow. And not every pregnant woman triggered me. It was just the fact that like I knew that these were people that were around what our due date would have been. And so it felt like this visual constant reminder of, wow, that's what my belly would have looked like, or I would have been at a similar stage as her, just feeling like I'm completely missing out on this super exciting thing that all my friends are still getting to experience. And I know that jealousy is wrong. I know that envy is wrong. And I just really had to give those burdens to God. I had to ask him to take away any temptation to feel envious or jealous. And I really feel like he answered that prayer. Slowly it got easier and easier, but it wasn't the season that maybe I would make the most plans with that person. My boundary for my own heart was, I can love this person, but it might not be healthy for me to be their absolute bestie during this because it was just so fresh and so raw. Yeah. And then the second wave of kind of grief and what felt triggering was when all of those babies were born, because seeing them hold their babies was hard. I'm not gonna lie, but I at the same time was so excited for their babies and for their families. I wouldn't want them not to experience that. It's just I wanted to be a part of it too. And so trusting God's sovereignty was really hard in that season, but I know that God has a good plan for us. It's just those things were triggering and still can be a little bit triggering for me. Do you feel like this experience has changed how you view children and just family, parenthood?
Yeah, I think this experience has really put into perspective how much of a miracle having children really is. Having had Georgia right away when we wanted to, having had the second pregnancy happen when we had planned to, didn't really set us up for the expectation that kids really are a miracle and pregnancy is a miracle. Having now talked to so many other people and couples that I knew that I didn't know had experienced this before, and how much compassion they had towards us, because there were multiple people that, when we had our news come out, that had approached me saying, I'm so sorry. I know how hard that is. My wife had been through this before, or had been through this a couple times, or, I totally understand what your wife is feeling. Like, I've been through it and it's really hard. And I think it really opened up my eyes to the stress and miracle that childbearing years are.
Yeah, I don't think that I will ever view anyone that has a baby bump or holding a baby as anything less than a miracle.
So what would you tell other women that are currently going through a miscarriage or are grieving a past miscarriage?
Gosh, I would just tell them to feel it all. I think that it's really easy to try to stuff down those emotions, and I think it's really important for you to just let yourself be a mess. It's devastating what just happened to you. You just lost something that you were completely excited about. You lost someone. Women are all like this. When you find out you're pregnant, you are like in the future. You're planning. You're already on Pinterest. You're looking at names. You're thinking of ways that you're going to tell your family and friends. Like, you're down the rabbit hole. So it's not just, when someone finds out that you lost your baby only 5 weeks in, only 9 weeks in, only 12 weeks in, well, at least you weren't that far along. Well, in her mind, she was far along, because women think eternity ahead when they find out news like this. So it's not just, you weren't that far along. It's her idea and her dream and her just version of reality that was about to happen just got crushed. And so the amount of time that you are pregnant does not determine how much you're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to be sad, you're allowed to be angry, you're allowed to be upset, but I also encourage you to give all of those emotions to God, because He understands. And it just breaks my heart that so many women, they don't have a support system around them to help them grieve well. I think a lot of people minimize the pain of miscarriage. I think that because people don't know what to say, oftentimes they say really hurtful things, maybe not even realizing it. But I would say just find people who are going to love you well in this season. Find people that you can pray with, that are going to pray for you. Don't be afraid to just say you're struggling, because it was so hard to function through that grief, because motherhood didn't stop. I was still a mom. I was still, we're still running a business. Like, we had so much going on, and I regret not slowing down a little bit more. I think I tried to bury myself in work a little bit, but my encouragement is just to let people in and not be afraid to be a mess for a while, but also to know that there's hope. Like, sure, the feelings still come up for me, but there's so much hope, and it's okay to be scared to get pregnant again, but don't let that stop you from trying. Like us, we're just on a journey right now, trying to be hopeful and trying not to be fearful. There's just so many emotions that are going to come up, and I guess my biggest piece of advice is I would say counseling is an amazing idea. Counseling has really helped me just sort through all of the things that I needed to sort through. So I would say prayer and being in the Word have been the number one thing, and then counseling has been huge, and then just making sure that you really let your support system know how you need to be supported, and just to know that it comes in waves. Grief is so interesting. You will have a day where you are just feeling like you're getting completely drowned by grief, and then the next day you just feel okay. It's so hard to explain. So just be patient with yourself and know that it's not always going to feel this heavy. A lot of women understand what you're going through, unfortunately. So many do. So just talk with those women, let them in, let them encourage you. I really hope that this episode gets to the right person, that this encourages you and that this helps you feel less alone. We're still in the midst of figuring out what's next for us, but we know that God is good, and that, through all of this, we have grown tremendously as a couple.
Absolutely.
I 100% know that God has used this for good in our family. That's just like God, to use something that's so hard and make it into something beautiful. And I feel like He's done that with us through our relationship, and then even how we've been able to encourage others.